The fluorescent lights of the ICU hummed with a sound only Stella could hear, a high-pitched frequency that usually signaled a migraine or a bomb threat. Tonight it was just the headache. Rain lashed against the reinforced glass of St. Jude's Trauma Center, distorting the neon city lights into bleeding streaks of red and blue. Stella stood by the nurse's station, her hands trembling slightly as she organized patient charts. It wasn't fear, it was never fear. It was the residual nerve damage from a mission in Belgrade 5 years ago, a constant electric reminder of a life she had buried under blue scrubs and silence. "Look at her," Dr. Vance sneered, leaning against the counter, spinning a sleek silver pen between his fingers. He was the hospital's new golden boy, charm, jawline, and a diploma from Harvard that Stella had already noted looked too pristine for its age. "Nurse Shakes is at it again. Are you sure you can hold a syringe without stabbing yourself, Stella?" The other nurses giggled, nervous titters meant to appease the alpha in the room. Stella didn't look up. She focused on the file in front of her. Senator Hargraves, admitted for an emergency appendectomy. Routine, boring, except for the man holding the scalpel. "I'm fine, Dr. Vance," Stella said, her voice soft, barely carrying over the hum of the monitors. "You're a liability," Vance snapped, his smile vanishing. "I don't want you in my OR tonight. You're strictly on mop-up duty. Stay out of the way of the real professionals." He pushed past her, his shoulder checking hers hard enough to make her stumble. Stella absorbed the impact, her body fluid, balanced. She didn't react, she didn't glare, but as Vance walked away, she noticed something that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. He walked with a heavy heel strike, arrogant, loud, but his hands, they were too smooth. No calluses from years of scrubbing in, no distinct sanitizer dermatitis that every surgeon in this building had. "He's not ready," Stella whispered to herself. "What was that?" Head Nurse Miller barked, stepping out of the supply closet. "Stop muttering and get the senator prepped. Vance insists on doing the procedure immediately. And Stella, try not to drop anything." Stella nodded, her face a mask of dull obedience. But as she walked toward the VIP suite, her trembling hands went still. The trimmer stopped the moment her mind shifted gears. The nurse was gone. The operative was awake. The pre-op room was freezing, a tactical error in hospital climate control that usually agitated patients. Senator Hargraves was groggy, sedated heavily, too heavily. Stella checked the IV drip. The dosage was high, bordering on reckless. She dialed it back with a subtle flick of her wrist, obscuring the movement as Vance swept into the room, flanked by 2 junior residents who looked at him like he was a deity. "Let's get this show on the road," Vance announced, snapping a pair of latex gloves on. Stella watched him. He pulled the gloves on without washing his hands first. A rookie mistake? No, a civilian mistake. A surgeon's ritual of scrubbing is muscle memory. It's religion. Vance had skipped it entirely. "Dr. Vance," Stella said, her voice cutting through the sycophantic chatter of the residents, "the scrub sink is outside." Vance froze. The room went silent. He looked at his gloved hands, then at Stella, his eyes narrowing into slits of pure venom. "I scrubbed in the other room, nurse. Do not question me in front of my patient." "It's protocol to scrub adjacent to the OR," Stella persisted, stepping closer. Her eyes scanned him. His lab coat was buttoned wrong. The top button was undone, a style choice, not a medical one. And there was a bulge under his left arm, too bulky for a pager, too rigid for a wallet. "Get her out of here," he hissed to Head Nurse Miller, who had just entered. "She's insubordinate. I want her fired, now." "Stella, leave," Miller commanded, pointing to the door. "Report to HR immediately." Stella didn't move. She was looking at the monitor. The senator's heart rate was spiking. "He's reacting to the sedative. You overdosed him." "I did exactly what was required," Vance shouted, grabbing a scalpel from the tray. "We are cutting now before the appendix bursts. Everyone, back." He wasn't holding the scalpel like a pencil, with precision. He was gripping it like a knife, like a weapon. Stella's assessment clicked into place. The fake degree, the lack of hygiene, the aggression. He wasn't just an incompetent doctor, he was a hitman in a lab coat, and the senator wasn't here for surgery, he was here for an execution. The air in the operating room shifted, heavy with the metallic scent of impending violence. Vance loomed over the unconscious senator, the scalpel gleaming under the harsh halogen lights. The residents stepped back, sensing something was wrong but too terrified to speak. "Dr. Vance, wait!" one resident stammered. "The anesthesia hasn't fully... the stats aren't stable." "Silence," Vance roared. He raised the blade. He wasn't aiming for the lower right quadrant where the appendix sat. He was aiming higher, toward the abdominal aorta. A nick there would look like a surgical accident. The senator would bleed out in seconds. Stella moved. She didn't run, she flowed. One moment she was by the door, the next she was at the operating table. As Vance brought the blade down, Stella's hand shot out. She caught his wrist mid-air. The shock in the room was palpable. The quiet, trembling nurse had just intercepted a surgeon's stroke with the speed of a striking cobra. "Let go of me, you lunatic!" Vance screamed, struggling. But he couldn't move. Stella's grip was iron. Her fingers dug into his ulnar nerve. "You're not a doctor," Stella said, her voice dropping an octave, losing all its softness. It was cold, flat, and commanding. "You're holding a number 10 blade with a hammer grip. You didn't scrub. You don't know the anatomy." Vance's eyes widened, panic flashing behind the arrogance. He tried to knee her, a dirty street-fighting move. Stella anticipated it. She twisted his wrist, forcing the scalpel from his hand. It clattered onto the tile floor. "Security!" Nurse Miller screamed from the viewing gallery. "Code Gray and OR4! The nurse has gone crazy!" Vance seized the moment. "She's trying to kill the senator! Help me!" He shoved Stella back, reaching into his coat, not for a medical tool, but for the bulge she had spotted earlier, a suppressed pistol. The residents screamed. Stella kicked the instrument tray, sending a shower of steel clamps and scissors crashing into Vance. He stumbled back, the gun tangling in his coat. "Everybody down!" Stella commanded, grabbing the nearest resident and shoving them under the table just as the first silenced shot spit through the air, shattering the IV pole beside the senator's head. The ruse was over, the surgery was a hit, and Stella was the only thing standing between the senator and a body bag. The silenced gunshot echoed like a whip crack, unnatural and terrifying in the sterile room. The residents were screaming, scrambling on the floor, sliding in the spilled antiseptic. Vance had recovered his balance. He leveled the gun at Stella, his face twisted in a snarl that shed the last remnants of his doctor persona. "You should have stayed in the corner, shaking like a leaf," he spat. Stella stood behind the heavy anesthesia machine, using it as cover. Her mind was a tactical HUD, analyzing angles and resources. Weapon, Glock 19, suppressed. Range, 15 feet. Her assets, a pressurized oxygen tank, a tray of scalpels, and the element of surprise. "You're sloppy, Vance," Stella called out, her voice calm, echoing off the tiles. "You printed a degree but didn't study the role. You walked like a thug, not a healer." "Shut up and die!" Vance fired 2 more shots. Sparks flew from the metal casing of the machine. Suddenly, the OR doors burst open. Stella expected hospital security. Instead, 3 men in tactical black gear, wearing heavy vests and gas masks, stormed in. They weren't police. They were the extraction team, Vance's backup. "Secure the target, eliminate the witness," the lead mercenary barked, his voice distorted. "Told you, liability." Stella didn't panic. She reached down, ripped the valve off the spare oxygen tank, and kicked it toward the door. The tank hissed violently, spinning like a missile. "Cover!" Stella yelled, dropping flat. The tank slammed into the lead mercenary's shins, shattering bone. He went down screaming. The escaping gas created a blinding white fog in the confined space. In the chaos, Stella moved. She didn't flee, she advanced. She slid through the fog, grabbed a discarded scalpel from the floor, and rose behind the second gunman. With a precise anatomical movement, she jammed the handle, not the blade, into the pressure point of his neck. He dropped instantly, unconscious. She grabbed his radio and his sidearm, checked the chamber, and rolled back behind the table just as Vance fired blindly into the smoke. "Who is she?" Vance screamed, panic rising. "She's just a nurse." Stella checked the senator's pulse, rapid but steady. She keyed the stolen radio, her voice shifting into a code she hadn't used 3 years. "Echo 49er to base. The nest is compromised, requesting immediate extraction. I have the package." She looked at her hand. It was perfectly still. The hospital PA system crackled. "Code Black. Lockdown initiated. All personnel remain in your designated areas." The lights in the corridor flickered and died, replaced by the eerie red glow of emergency backups. The hum of the ventilation system cut out, leaving a heavy, suffocating silence. Stella dragged the unconscious senator onto a gurney. She couldn't stay in the OR. They would gas the room or breach with grenades. She needed to move. She burst through the rear service doors, pushing the gurney with one hand, the stolen gun held tight against her side in the other. The hallway was empty, shadows stretching long and distorted against the walls. "Admin is involved," she muttered. The lockdown had happened too fast. The cameras were likely looped. Vance wasn't just a hitman, he was an invited guest. She reached the freight elevator, but the panel was dead. Sabotage. "Stairs it is," she whispered, locking the wheels of the gurney. She couldn't carry the senator alone. She needed a safe room. A shadow detached itself from the gloom at the end of the hall. It was head nurse Miller. She stood frozen, clutching a clipboard to her chest, her eyes wide with terror. "Stella?" Miller whimpered. They killed the security guard at the desk. Who are they?" Stella holstered the weapon instantly, raising her hands to show she was safe, though her demeanor had shifted. She wasn't the submissive employee anymore. She stood tall, her shoulders squared. "Miller? Listen to me carefully," Stella said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "This hospital has been infiltrated. Dr. Vance is an assassin. I need you to open the pharmacy secure storage now." I don't have the key," Miller stammered. "Yes, you do. You keep the override on your badge lanyard. I've seen you use it." Stella stepped closer. "If you want to live, you need to trust me. The shaking hands, the quiet nurse, forget all of it. Right now, I am the only thing keeping you from a bullet." Miller looked at Stella's face, the steel in her eyes, the utter lack of fear. She nodded, fumbling for her badge. As they moved toward the pharmacy, the radio on Stella's belt crackled. "She's on the 4th floor. Flush her out. Kill the staff if you have to." It was Vance's voice. Stella looked at Miller. "Run to the stairwell. Hide on the roof. Do not come out until you hear sirens." "What are you going to do?" Miller whispered. Stella turned back toward the dark corridor, cracking her neck. "I'm going to conduct a surgery." The pharmacy was a maze of tall metal shelving units, filled with rows of colored bottles and blister packs. It was dark, save for the red emergency light spinning slowly in the corner. Stella crouched behind a rack of antibiotics, listening. Heavy boots crunched on the broken glass in the hallway. 2 hostiles, professional movement. They were sweeping the rooms. She checked her stolen weapon. 3 rounds left. Not enough for a firefight. She needed to be creative. She scanned the shelves. Ethanol, ammonia, bleach. Basic, but effective. The door creaked open. The beams of tactical flashlights cut through the gloom. "Check the aisles," a voice commanded. Stella moved silently to the compounding station. She grabbed a bottle of concentrated ammonia and a jug of bleach. It was a crude chemical weapon, dangerous in a confined space, but she had a mask, a simple N95 she pulled from her pocket. She poured the chemicals into a glass beaker, the fumes instantly reacting to create chloramine gas. She slid the beaker across the floor, under the shelving units, toward the center of the room. "What was that?" one gunman asked, swinging his light. "Movement, row 3. They advanced. Stella climbed the shelving unit, pulling herself up into the ceiling crawl space just as the gas began to rise. Coughing started below, violent, hacking coughs. "Gas! Clear out!" But it was too late. The men stumbled, eyes burning, lungs seizing. One of them fired blindly into the shelves, shattering bottles of pills that rained down like confetti. Stella dropped from the ceiling behind the last man. He was disoriented, wheezing. She didn't use the gun. She used a tourniquet she'd grabbed from the counter. She looped it around his neck, twisting tight, using his own body weight to pull him off balance. He thrashed, but Stella was a ghost. She held on until he went limp, then lowered him silently to the floor. She stripped his vest, taking his ammo and a flashbang grenade. The second man was crawling toward the door, retching. Stella stepped over him, kicking his rifle away. She knelt, pressing the muzzle of her pistol to his temple. "Where is Vance?" she asked. "Morgue, basement, prepping the incinerator." Stella's blood ran cold. They weren't just going to kill the senator, they were going to erase him entirely. And if Vance was in the morgue, he had a backup exit strategy through the underground tunnels. The stairwell to the basement was a black throat swallowing the light. Stella moved down the steps, counting them in the dark. 12, turn, 12, turn. The air grew colder, smelling of damped concrete and formaldehyde. This was the hospital's underbelly, a place most staff avoided. For Stella, it was just another battlefield. She reached the heavy steel doors of the morgue. They were slightly ajar. A wedge of yellow light spilled out onto the floor. She peered through the crack. The morgue was vast, lined with stainless steel drawers. In the center, the industrial incinerator roared, its hunger evident in the heat shimmering off the metal. Vance was there. He had abandoned the Doctor Act entirely. He was in tactical gear now, barking orders into a satellite phone. "The extraction is blown. I'm burning the evidence. Get the chopper to the roof in 5. 2 more mercenaries stood guard by a gurney. On it lay a body bag. Stella's heart skipped. The senator? No, the shape was wrong, too small. She looked closer. The senator was still missing. Vance was burning files, boxes of them. This goes deeper, Stella realized. The senator wasn't just a target. He was the whistleblower. The hospital was a front for something massive: illegal organ trade, experimental drugs, or money laundering. Vance was cleaning house before he ran. Stella checked her gear. 1 flashbang, a stolen rifle, and the element of surprise. She needed to disable the incinerator to create chaos. There was a gas line running along the ceiling, feeding the furnace. She raised the rifle, aiming not at the men, but at the valve handle above the furnace. It was a difficult shot, 50 feet, low light, iron sights. Her hands. She looked at them. For a split second, the old tremor ghosted through her fingers. The memory of the torture in Belgrade, the wires, the pain. Not today. She inhaled. The world narrowed to the front sight post. Exhale. She squeezed the trigger. The bullet sparked off the valve, spinning it shut. The gas line ruptured with a deafening hiss, spewing flammable vapor into the room. The incinerator's flames sputtered and flared wildly, sending a jet of fire shooting toward the ceiling. "Contact!" Vance screamed, diving behind a steel autopsy table. The mercenaries opened fire at the door, bullets chewing through the metal frame. Stella didn't retreat. She pulled the pin on the flashbang and bowled it into the room. Bang! A blinding white light erased the shadows. The mercenaries screamed, clutching their eyes. Stella breached. She took the first man down with a double tap to the chest plate and a sweep of his legs. He went down hard. The second man swung his rifle blindly. Stella used the stock of her weapon to shatter his wrist, then drove the butt into his jaw. Silence returned, broken only by the roar of the damaged gas line. "Vance," Stella called out, moving tactically between the rows of body drawers. "It's over. The gas is filling the room. One spark and we all burn." "You think I care?" Vance's voice echoed from the back of the room. "I'm a ghost, Stella. I don't exist. But you're just a washed-up nurse who forgot her place." A shadow moved. Stella spun, raising her rifle, but Vance was faster. He lunged from behind a pillar, tackling her. The rifle skittered across the floor. They crashed into a tray of surgical tools, metal clattering loudly. Vance was strong, fueled by desperation. He pinned Stella against a cold storage locker, his hands closing around her throat. "You should have kept shaking," he snarled, squeezing. Stella's vision blurred. The edges of the room turned dark, but her mind was clear. This was close quarters. This was her world. She didn't try to pull his hands away. Instead, she reached into her pocket, her fingers closing around a syringe she had palmed from the anesthesia cart in the OR. Succinylcholine, a paralytic. She jammed the needle into Vance's neck and depressed the plunger.
Vance gasped, his grip faltering instantly. He stumbled back, clutching his neck. What did you—" His words slurred. "Muscle relaxant," Stella gasped, rubbing her throat. "Fast acting. Your diaphragm will stop working in about 30 seconds. You won't be able to breathe." Vance fell to his knees, clawing at his chest. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the primal terror of suffocation. "Tell me where the senator is," Stella demanded, standing over him. The fire from the gas leak was growing, licking at the ceiling tiles. The sprinklers finally kicked on, drenching them in cold, gray water. Vance pointed a trembling hand toward a large walk-in cooler at the far end of the morgue. His eyes rolled back and he collapsed, paralyzed but conscious, staring up at the water raining down. Stella left him. She ran to the cooler and threw open the latch. Inside, sitting on the floor wrapped in thermal blankets, was Senator Hargreaves. He was pale but alive. Who are you?" he rasped. "I'm your nurse," Stella said, helping him up. "We're leaving." They moved toward the exit tunnel. As they reached the heavy blast doors, the sound of rotors thumped overhead. The building shook. "My friends?" the senator asked hopefully. "Let's hope," Stella said. They emerged into the rainy night through the ambulance bay loading dock. The scene was chaotic. Police cruisers, SWAT vans, and 2 black SUVs with no plates blocked the exit. A man in a trench coat stepped out of the lead SUV. He didn't look like a cop. He looked like management. Stella raised her gun one last time, shielding the senator. "Stand down, agent," he called out. He raised a hand, not in surrender, but in greeting. He tapped his wrist, a specific coded gesture. Stella lowered the gun. She knew that sign. The man walked over, ignoring the chaos of the police securing the perimeter. He looked at Stella, wet, covered in soot, blood on her scrubs, and nodded. "Agent 4, he said quietly. "We thought you were retired." "I was," Stella replied, her voice raspy, "but the retirement plan didn't cover boredom." She handed him the senator. "He's the package. Vance is in the basement. He's paralyzed, but he'll keep. He was burning files. The hospital is a laundry for the cartel." The man signaled his team to take the senator. Then he turned back to Stella. "You blew your cover, Stella. You can't stay here. The cartel will know who did this." Stella looked back at the hospital. The lights were coming back on. She saw Nurse Miller standing in the window of the 4th floor, watching. "I was never really here," Stella said. She looked at her hands. They were steady, rock steady. "What now?" the man asked. "We have an opening in the division. We need someone who can operate in the dark." Stella unclipped her hospital ID badge. It read, "Stella Vance, RN." She tossed it into a puddle. "I'm done with needles," Stella said, turning toward the dark city streets. "I think I'm ready to get back to the scalpel."
As she walked away, the rain washed the blood from her hands, but the fire in her eyes remained. The quiet nurse was gone, the operator was back online, and somewhere in the dark, a phone began to ring.